members, good morning. I call to order the meeting of the subcommittee to study the effectiveness, costs, and management of public works projects. It's the appointed time. We have a quorum. Now, the first agenda item is date of the next meeting and items for discussion. Please note that the list of outstanding items for discussion is included in the agenda. The Secretariat has taken note of the proposed items for discussions raised at the first meeting on 11th of June. And the Deputy Chairman and I have met with the administration on 2nd of July to discuss the work plan for the subcommittee. We have thus prepared the list of outstanding items for discussion. That is LC paper number CB brackets 11062/2024 brackets 01. The next meeting, the third meeting, is tentatively going to be held late September or October of this year to look into why the costs of construction are so high in Hong Kong. The Secretariat will notify members in due course the date and time of the next meeting. Moving on to the next agenda item, the second agenda item, overview of Hong Kong construction cost and prevailing cost management measures, as well as strengthening the role of the LegCo in approval of public works projects. I'll now invite the representatives of the administration to come inside the conference room. Public officers in attendance today include Secretary for Development, Ms. Bernadette Lin, Mr. Ricky Lau, Permanent Secretary for Development Works, Mr. Joseph Low, Head of Project Strategy and Governance Office, PSGO of the Development Bureau, and their team members. I'll assign a 4-minute time limit, questions and answers included. I will now invite the Secretary for Development, Ms. Bernadette Lin, brief members on the paper provided by the administration. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. This committee was set up just at the right timing because at the Council, concern was raised last year on the high construction costs. Starting from Q4 of this year, the Development Bureau has started a review. At the end of this year, we should be able to propose some measures. With the establishment of this subcommittee, in the next few months, we should be able to provide some updates to members. With this subcommittee, we are also able to commence some formal discussions on the issue. Today, we will lay the foundations for our future discussions. For example, regarding the overview of construction works in Hong Kong. Most of the works in Hong Kong are public works, so we will also talk about our approval procedures. We'll also talk about the trends in tendering and the relevant costs of construction. Today, we will focus on the content that is informational. In 2018, we have started our work in promoting Construction 2.0. In our work in that direction, we want to promote the use of technologies in the construction industry so as to decrease construction costs and enhance productivity. If you have looked at the International Construction Index, in the top 10, most of the cities have high living costs. So Hong Kong is, of course, one of them. We are also one of the cities that have the highest development intensity. We are also faced with spatial constraints such as our mountainous terrain. This is one of the reasons why we have high construction costs. As I said earlier, in the International Construction Cost Index, we used to rank top 3. And in such rankings, it is better to rank lower. We are now ranked the 9th. The cities that come after us in Asia would be Macau as well as Singapore. We're conducting a strategic review to formulate targeted solutions to the issue. In future discussions, apart from costs, I would ask members to also look at the cost effectiveness. So it's not that the cost that is the lowest would be the best option. So this is the direction that we are going to take. We do want to hear more from members on our views, but before that, I will ask Mr. Low to give members a presentation on the paper. Thank you. Today, I will give a presentation on the overview of Hong Kong construction cost and prevailing cost management measures, as well as the approval procedures of the government. The government has been continuously developing infrastructure to promote economic development, improve people's living environment, and enhance Hong Kong's long-term competitiveness. However, the construction industry is faced with many challenges, including the skyrocketing construction costs. As you may have noted here, for the International Construction Cost Index between 2016 and 2020, Hong Kong was ranked in the top 3 globally. With this concerted efforts of the community, we have now gone back to ranking the 9th. But as the Secretary said, we have relatively high costs of living and high construction costs still. The Development Bureau has been conducting a strategic review into the issue. I will now talk about the overview of construction costs in Hong Kong at the moment. Right now, the capital works expenditure for the 2023-24 financial year was about $85 billion, and we expect that the total estimated capital works expenditure for 2024-25 financial year and the years beyond will be about $90 billion. Counting other public organizations such as Housing Authority, Airport Authority, Mass Transit Railway Corporation, and private organizations, the overall construction volume of Hong Kong in 2024-25 will be about $250 billion. With the construction costs trends for wages for workers, such as bar benders as well as concreters, you can see the 10-year wage trend for the different categories of workers. So the increase ranges from 15% to 40%. The overall increase of the wages of construction workers is similar to those of other non-supervisory trades over the same period. Having talked about the wages of construction workers, I'll now move on to the costs for construction materials. Again, the different lines would show the different costs for different materials, such as cement, aggregates, and so on. You can see that the increase ranges from 20% to 70%. The trend of increase in construction material costs in Hong Kong is broadly similar to that in other neighboring cities. Having talked about the costs, I will talk about the prices. We have all along been monitoring the indices relating to tender prices. So for the Civil Engineering Works Tender Price Index as well as Building Works Tender Price Index, BWTP, shown by the red and blue lines, respectively, you can see that they have peaked in 2015 and 2016, respectively. The indices dropped since then, but then the rising trend picked up again from 2021 onwards. In summary, the changes in the tender price indices reflects that in addition to workers' wages and material costs, there are other factors such as overall construction volume, global economic environment, company strategies, and risk analyses, and so on. Let me now talk about the manpower demand of the construction industry. According to the manpower forecast released by the Construction Industry Council in 2023, the construction sector will be short of relevant personnel by 40,000 people by 2027. To address the manpower demand of the industry, we have been adopting multi-pronged measures, including recruiting new blood to join the industry, enhancing the training of local manpower, and promoting the application of technologies to uplift the productivity. And in 2018 and 2022, injections were made into the CITF Construction Innovation and Technology Fund to promote the use of technologies in the industry. As at June, we have injected a number of funds, $1.27 billion for the purpose. We would suggest that the labor importation scheme for the construction sector would serve as a supplementary measure to alleviate the manpower shortage. With the use of technologies, we have been promoting the use of MIC and MIMEP in the construction industry. We would also promote the use of innovative construction materials. We will also promote the digitalization of public works, such as the adoption of digital works supervision system, DWSS, the BIM building information modeling, as well as the 4S smart site safety system, which would uplift the management efficiency of public works, thereby controlling project costs and enhancing site safety. Having talked about the costs trends of public works projects, I will talk about the approval process of public works projects. After project initiation, projects would have to go through design, public consultation, tendering, etc. Some would require planning or environmental protection approvals. When the planning and design of the project has been substantially completed, the Policy Bureau would have to consult the electrical panel concerned, and then the project would be submitted to the Public Works Subcommittee PWSC for consideration, and then the Finance Committee for funding approval. I will now talk about the project estimate. Generally, a rough estimate of the construction cost will be made at its inception stage, and a realistic project estimate will be worked out after the detailed design is completed. The project estimate would include the construction cost, ground infestation cost, consultancy fee, site supervision cost of resident site staff, project contingency, and provision for price adjustment, etc. The project team, in estimating the cost, will not only refer to the costs of other similar projects and the latest market situation, they will also consider the nature, uniqueness, difficulty, and complexity of the project itself. The Development Bureau will act as an independent third party and participate in the project cost vetting process starting from the project inception stage, and will assist works departments to optimize project design and lower the costs concerned.
Since our establishment, the PSGO and the former PCMO, we have examined over 540 projects where funding is seeking sort from the FC. We have saved $190 million out of the $1.2 billion in the overall budget. Next, procedures of tender invitation and evaluation. The government has been adopting the principles of achieving best value for money and maintaining open and fair competition for the procurement of public works contracts, with clear guidelines and procedures set out for tender invitations and evaluations. We normally adopt two-envelope, two-stage approach. Tenderers are required to submit technical proposals and price proposals. In evaluation, we will firstly assess tenderers' technical competence and past performance, followed by their tender prices. Then a combined score will be derived, depending on the complexity of the works. The weighting of a tender's scores on the technical aspects against the overall score are 63% to 72% for consultancy agreements and 40% to 50% for works contracts. The tender with the highest combined score will normally be accepted. To prevent tenderers from submitting unreasonably low bids to win the bids, we have put in place a mechanism to exclude tenders with unreasonably low bids. This will avoid contract default or other risks due to inadequate tender prices. And then I will talk about the present cost management measures. In 2009, we started the NEC form, and up to now, there are over 620 contracts adopting NEC form, and with a total sum of over $400 billion, and 100 works contracts have been completed with accounts finalized. And for the larger-scale compared capital works projects commenced in 2023, 100% of them have adopted the NEC form. Summing up our experience, the NEC form has an advantage over the conventional contract in terms of risk and claim management. And the adoption of the target contract options can help reduce risk, and then it can help cut down on unnecessary costs and enhance the cost effectiveness. We can also reduce the risk of cost overrun and delays. So we encourage that for projects with higher risks, the target contract options should be adopted. In 2018, we also launched a project surveillance system to monitor the performance projects on a continuous basis and provide predictive analysis for forecasting the costs and time performance of ongoing projects. Through this system, the works departments can foresee the challenges or potential problems of ongoing projects and provide early warning signals to the senior management for necessary early intervention. And we also have regular high-level meetings to monitor progress of works so that we can grasp the latest progress of works. And if needed, measures can be drawn up to deal with the problem. And in September 2020, starting from that date, parallel tendering has to be adopted for the procurement of all works contracts and works-related consultancies. The objective is to reflect the tender price in the approved project estimate so that the project can be better managed financially. It can also avoid unnecessary lockup of internal resources that may affect the implementation of other projects. Last but not least, overall performance of public works. In the 10 legislative sessions from 2013 to 2023, the FC approved a total of about 550 Category A projects, with a total funding of $970 billion. Only 3% of them, i.e. 16 projects, had to seek FC approval for increase in APE due to unforeseen circumstances. And at the same time, there were 534 Category A projects with their final accounts settled. The original APEs totaled about $170 billion, and the total final expenditure was only about 153%, and that is 90% of the original APEs. Overall, we can complete all the capital works projects within the original APEs. Actually, we have a surplus. According to Professor Bent Fluberver of the University of Oxford, he has compared the performance of Hong Kong's public works projects with other places such as Canada, Denmark, the Netherlands, Sweden, and the UK. We find that our mechanism for delivering public works projects and cost control measures are better than those of other places. And the probability of Hong Kong's public works projects experiencing cost overruns is far lower than that of other places. As mentioned just now, we are conducting a strategic study to compare to identify the main reasons for the high construction costs. We aim to come up with strategic measures to control construction cost. We will make reference to mainland and other cities, and we would look at the construction costs there. We would also gain an in-depth understanding of the main elements of a construction cost. We will also conduct a comprehensive review of the procurement approach, consultancy studies, technology, application approval, and workflow. Later on, at future subcommittee meetings, we will give an account of the study progress, and we'll discuss the relevant measures for controlling the costs of public works projects. So much for my presentation, Chairman. Thank you, Development Bureau. So it's time for the members to ask questions. Let me remind members, this is about the Hong Kong construction cost and prevailing cost management measures, as well as strengthening the role of electrical approval of public works projects. Now, among the various measures, actually, we have a total of 6 meetings. This is the second meeting, and we will have opportunity to talk about specific measures, say for labor arrangements, monitoring of public works, technology, application, etc., etc., and also specific measures relating to cutting cost on public works projects. And then about the role of this electrical in approving the public works projects. We're very concerned about transparency. For the FC paper, which is very thin, if you have comments on that, we can discuss that at the Public Works Subcommittee of the Finance Committee. This is my suggestion. So we'll start with the Q&A. Dr. Lo Wai Kok. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. This is a comprehensive paper prepared by the Development Bureau, the current situation of the Hong Kong construction landscape, and also the tender price index and components of construction costs and so on. So there is a sort of brief introduction on those aspects. Chairman, I think that for this subcommittee, we should not just look at the construction cost. We should also look at the construction period for Hong Kong's public works projects. We find that the construction period is very long. At different meetings, we have talked about that, and we came up with a lot of criticisms. Say, for example, the construction of the North Metropolis is a very important project. We would like to enhance the speed, efficiency, quality, and quantity. And then there is a east-west highway. The study of that takes about 38 minutes, and the estimate is $1.1 billion. I would not say it's unreasonable. There might be different reasons for that. But compared to our neighboring cities, this kind of speed is too slow, and it affects our overall competitiveness. So the construction period being too long is something that we should explore into. Now, the construction period is in every way related to the cost. You can imagine that the longer the construction period, the construction cost will go up. This is just natural. So this is a very important subject. And one of the reasons for the prolonged construction period, as mentioned in the paper, is about the approval process. And I'm happy to see that in the recent development panel meeting, the Development Bureau has come up with a sort of a set of administrative guidelines presented to us, and we had some fruitful discussion in that meeting. And what is most creditable is that the administration says we should change our mindset. We should emphasize that we are the facilitator. Well, compared to the past, we were just a regulator. We regulated on everything. So this change of mindset is something that I would like to comment on. And then you should try to adopt the mindset of the applicant in whatever you do. And this is very good. At the various occasions, I have mentioned about the prolonged construction period, and I've cited some examples. Say, for example, for road works, because the road works are being approved bit by bit, section by section, and highways departments, transport departments, and the police are involved in the approval process. And the contractors had a hard time. They couldn't speed things up. So this is something that we should really look into in our future work, the construction period and also the approval process and so on. Secretary? Well, we note your point, and in subsequent meetings in the next few months, we would examine why the construction period is too long. And we would also be examining the approval process. In the recent past, we've been focusing on the statutory procedures, and recently we've turned to the administrative procedures. We advocate a change of mindset, but still we have a lot of approval processes. What are the processes that can be done away with? And we also have certain requirements to adhere to: when the construction work should start, when the construction work can take place and should stop, and so on. There are sort of public expectations on those. So we have to be mindful about these factors which affect our construction period. Mr. Chen Xiu-Hong. Like what Dr. Low said, the paper gives us a lot of details. And going forward, we need a lot more materials for our discussion. So we'll talk about that later on. Today we are on prevailing cost management measures and overview of Hong Kong construction cost. And there is this point: strengthening the role of the electrical in approval of public works projects. But the paper is silent on this point. Chairman, I am worried that we might not be able to touch on this point in this meeting. So we would like to seek clarification on the details as presented in the PowerPoint presentation. Now, the role. Well, although the paper is silent on that, I'd like to talk about that. I think, well, the electrical should have an interactive sort of relationship with the government. We represent the public to monitor the government in its work. We make sure that public funds are spent where necessary, and it is the value for money principle is adhered to, as like what the Secretary has said. And at the same time, we should not over-interfere with the management and the tendering of public works projects. We have to be very clear about this point. We should not spend our time to repeat what the government has done. They have already established a set of systems and frameworks for that. So what we need to do, like what Dr. Low said, is to see whether we remove all the barriers, we are working efficiently, and so on, in scrutinizing the items. And in cost management, well, I will be raising a few questions on the details. We should adopt this attitude. When the government presents papers to the FC or ESC, and we should believe in whatever they present to us. We should have trust that they can manage costs properly, But then I still want to drive home this message. In the private sector market, or say in large-scale public works projects, big consultancies, they always use a PPRI, post-project implementation reviews. So after the works projects have been completed, I'm referring to the major projects, they will do a review after the projects are finished. And the review is very simple. And they will make comparisons among the data and the information between and after the project is completed. And on a quarterly basis, receive information on when the projects are completed and what are the expenditures. But this doesn't suffice. The administration should provide more information. Say, when they answer to members' questions, they give reasons why certain items are more costly than others. Then after the projects have been completed, if the administration can provide information in that regard, that would be very helpful. Well, let me emphasize this. We don't want to over-interfere in whatever the government is doing. What we are concerned about the irregularities. Say, some items may be particularly costly, then tell us. Well, and we should also be building a database so that can serve as a reference for our review of the public works projects.
Chair, these are my suggestions. I'm not sure if the administration has already been doing such, but they can tell us if they have been doing such. Thank you. Secretary, thank you. Today's discussion would include the strengthening of the role of LegCo in approval of public works projects. I would first like to clarify, it's not that we don't want this, but it would be hard for us to include it in the content of this paper provided by the administration. Also, with the use of PPIR, the question on our stance, I will let the Permanent Secretary answer this question. Thank you. Thank you. For each project, we will have each works department review after the project what difficulties were encountered, what solutions there were, and the approach taken in the end. We would also review the costs. If it deviates from the estimates, we would find out about the reasons. For example, whether there were additional works or whether there were other reasons. Mr. Chan Su-hong. Thank you. I have a brief follow-up. Such information provided is useful because before, during some finance committee meetings, in the paper there would only be a short sentence saying that the estimate is reasonable, having made reference to similar projects. But then if there is a gap of $10,000 per square foot or square meter, there is no justification for that. There is no explanation whatsoever. Sometimes in the oral reply, the administration would provide would have an explanation saying that perhaps slope works were involved, there were other constraints. I think such information can be provided early on with PPIR, so you can perhaps include such in the paper or at some other meetings of the projects. The administration can provide such examples of other similar projects for the reference of the relevant stakeholders. I think that would be an ideal arrangement. Thank you. Regarding PPIR, that is post-implementation review, I believe people have already been doing that. So if you can release it to LegCo members for members' reference, or if possible, even the public. That would be ideal. For members with engineering background, that would be especially helpful. I think the administration does not have to give us an answer now. Because if they are to include such content in the paper, it would take much work. So I think perhaps they can do it for specific projects that have made use of, for example, advanced innovative materials that have made sure that the project would be completed on schedule or has decreased the costs significantly. Then they can include such content for reference of members. Thank you. Mr. Lau Kwok Fan. Thank you. Today, it is the right timing for us to review our construction project flow. Whether it is the review of administrative measures or otherwise, the Development Bureau has done a lot. I can see in September of last year, 6 pieces of legislation were amended. The Development Bureau has also briefed the panel on development recently on how to streamline administrative procedures. There is an urgent need to streamline procedures. For the senior officials, they are, of course, very eager to implement such measures. But how can we encourage the lower level civil servants to adopt such stance? I think it would still take some efforts and initiative. Today, we are to discuss in part the role of the council and its interaction with the executive. We have approved 540 Cat A projects in recent years. Most of them can be completed without delay or additional costs. So only 3% of them, 16 projects, had to seek the Finance Committee's approval for increase in the approved project estimate. What projects are they? Were they large-scale projects? Were they special projects that would have had the estimate increase? When funding is approved, many things are essentially set in stone. There is probably no way for us to change the outcome. But in early stages, if you can involve LegCo members to see how we can perhaps compress the costs even more, that would probably be beneficial. In questions or previous meetings of panels of the council, I have said that since 2020, for some years, some successful bids would only amount to approximately 70% of the funding approved. So it's lower than the proposed amount by the administration. Why is that? Is it because that the lower bids are involved that eventually there would be a cost that is higher than the expected bid? I understand that the Bureau has excluded the malicious low bids. I want to ask, how many of such bids have you excluded? I'm concerned about this because I'm afraid there may still be such happening often in works. So I want to ask if you will adopt the practices in the mainland or Macau that they would exclude the highest and the lowest bid. for consideration. I want to also ask about early contract involvement, ECI. If you adopt ECI for the successful tenders, you should be able to save costs on consultancy and thus lower the consultancy costs. I have observed that in detailed design, often consultants would have to overhaul the original design. I think the process is, of course, repetitive, and that would be a waste of resources. So I want to know more about the process of the administration in these areas. Thank you, Secretary. I would like to respond to 2 points, and then I'll let my team supplement my answers. In relation to the 16 projects that would require an increase in approved project estimate, we can provide more information about these projects after the meeting. I think that would definitely facilitate the scrutiny of members. When we obtain funding from Finance Committee, the process would start at the panel where we would brief panel members on the projects. So in the panel meetings, we would perhaps say an estimate is supposed to be an amount, but in the Finance Committee, we would already have a lower estimate. That is already somewhat of an improvement. And I would like to say this for public works project. Often we would want to be prudent, and I think members should understand we want to get a larger estimate in order to give us some room for our project estimates to go a bit higher. But then once we evaluate the tenders, it would seem to be the case that we are a bit too prudent, so we can have the estimate lowered. I think that would relate to our culture that has advocated for one to be prudent. So in the end, the Finance Committee's estimate would be one that we have derived after careful consideration. Is there any room to lower the estimate further? That is exactly what we're looking into in our study. We have many public works projects coming. We can perhaps adopt a different approach in the deriving of estimates, and we do not want contractors to be waiting for us while we make an approval or scrutinize the relevant estimates. That's what we want to look into in the streamlining of procedures. I will let my colleagues respond to the other points made by the member. Thank you. On maliciously low bids, we of course do not encourage this because many problems would arise from that, and often contractors would fail in the end. With the consultancy companies tendering, we would be more prudent if the bid deviates from the median by a relatively large gap. We would actually deduct the score of the contractor. For public works projects, we would review not only the price but also the justifications for the price. If the price is not exactly reasonable, we would require them to provide justifications. Between 2021 and 23, we had 12 bids that were unreasonable that we have rejected. Sometimes it would be the case that the lowest bid wins, but then it is not unreasonable. we have seen pretty good tendering for works projects. For 40% of the projects, it would be the case that they are not the lowest bid wins. For consultancy studies, it would be the case that 60% would not be the lowest bid wins. Thank you, Dr. Wendy Hong.
Thank you, Chair. The Hong Kong construction costs in Hong Kong ranks the top among countries in Asia. And this is not something that we are proud of. And it is important that we control the cost. I have several questions. First, about manpower resources. The wages of construction costs have risen sharply in the last 10 years, and the government launched the importation scheme for the construction sector, and 9,000 places have been approved. And media have recently reflected that it seems that public works project sites, all of the workers are imported workers. So can the administration clarify whether this is the case? How can we ensure that when we are importing laborers from outside, we would give employment priority to local workers? Have you made an assessment of how much cost has been saved by importing laborers? And we also lack professionals, and the Development Bureau has has undertaken recruitment activities overseas to relieve the shortage of professionals in Hong Kong. The top-notch universities in this respect are not listed in the list for our immigration program. Can we include these top-notch universities in our talent admission scheme? Thirdly, I know that the PSGO will act as an independent third party to vet the project, and a lot of costs have been saved, and we should do more. In the last few days, for the relocation of the sewage treatment plant in Sha-Tin, a substantial cost has been cut after the intervention of the PSGO. So they are doing a very good job. So there have been a lot of successful stories with the PSGO. Can you share those stories with the sector so that the sector can do a better job, can save on the construction costs further? And also, I would like to know about the establishment of the PSGO. Can they enlarge the scope of monitoring? Secretary, in a minute, I'll defer to the PS to talk about our recruitment of talents from overseas. And then can the PSGO share their work? Can I defer to the PSGO head? Now about importation of workers. Dr. Hong is very correct in her figures. Now the quota is 12,000 people. Before that special scheme was approved, we also imported certain workers. So a total of 9,700 have been imported, and 3,000 or so have already come to Hong Kong. Dr. Hong said that there are rumors that there are sites with all of the workers being imported workers. That can't be possible because we have this very stringent requirement, and that is for every imported worker, there should be at least 2 local workers employed. So sites should have the local workers as their mainstay and not imported workers. So if the situation mentioned by Dr. Hong is indeed the case, we have to enforce the law against these sites. Now, 12,000 is the number. Well, we have a tight labor market. The member asked, before and after the labor importation scheme was launched, has there been any change in the employment of local workers? The CNSD is compiling figures on employment among different sectors. Our information shows that there has not been a major change in the manpower situation in the construction sector before and after the labor importation scheme. And the workers' associations are in close liaison with the Labor Department and Development Bureau. If there are irregularities, we would deal with them. And maybe recruitment exercises have not been done properly. As a result, local workers couldn't find the right jobs. We are doing this all the time. Now, as for top-notch universities and also competing for talents and so on, can I defer to the permanent secretary? In terms of professionals, we know that the sector is looking for talents all the time. We are liaising with universities worldwide, and we also hope that the number of places can be increased. And in overseas countries and the mainland, we are also conducting recruitment activities. We have to pick universities which are related to our sector. In 2023, in April and from April to October, we have conducted 2 major recruitment events covering the Greater Bay Area and Zhejiang, Beijing, and Tsinghua University, and even Harbin. So we are doing recruitment at these universities in these places, and we have achieved good results. Last year, we have received 400 applications for the sectors, and 127 graduates from the mainland have already come to Hong Kong to join the sector, and we're still conducting recruitment activities now. Secondly, about the PSGO's work. We participate in the entire process of project delivery. Say, for example, in terms of the design of the project, we would be, suggesting different alternatives and options. Let me cite an example. For example, slope works. If we are to work on a major slope work, there are different methods to do it. We can use large retaining walls, or maybe we can cut the slope layer by layer. And very often, the department colleagues may opt for the more costly options to build large-scale retaining walls. But then if we can work on the site, on the land, we can further discuss with the departments. And if possible, we can change the retaining wall to, say, a cut slope, and that will drive the construction costs down. And we also understand that underground basement, we have to be very careful if we are building more than 2 stories of underground basements, because that would be very costly. So we will be looking at the different options. Now, as for the staff establishment, can I defer to the head to elaborate? Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank Dr. Hung for recognizing our work. Our sharing sessions, we are regularly meeting with works departments to do sharing, and every year we will organize a major forum to invite representatives from the consultancies, the contractors, and the works departments to do sharing. Let me give you an example. Last year, we organized an international forum inviting peers from the mainland and Singapore to do sharing on costs. On staff establishment, we have 15 professionals on the team, covering, say, the engineers, the architects, surveyors, and so on and so forth. We hope to increase our establishment so that we can do more work. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Gary Zhang. We all know that the construction cost in Hong Kong is very high, and it brings a lot of social impact and makes a lot of businesses non-viable. It affects our business environment and our overall competitiveness. And I think it's good that the government will conduct a study on that. I know that you will make some comparisons in the future. We all know that, well, construction cost is about the cost of manpower, machine, and materials, and so on. We can talk a lot about these aspects, but it's difficult for us to say or to conclude, say, if our cost is 4 or 4 times higher than that of other places. So how can it be attributed to the different components of the construction cost? Say, what is the ratio of manpower cost in terms of the excessive costs? So we can't make such conclusions. So if we are not clear about these specific data, and if you suggest certain specific measures, then that won't be effective. You may make a lot of efforts, but you might not be able to resolve the problem. So I hope that in the upcoming study, there will be more quantitative analysis so that we know better what changes need to be made. Second, specifically, two-envelope tendering process. In the previous papers to the electrical, the administration said that after the two-envelope approach was adopted, around 60% of the tenders were awarded to the lowest bidder, and in terms of the amount, 50%. After the two-envelope approach was adopted, so what is the percentage of bidders who get the bid who have the highest scores in the tender proposals? So that's what I would like to know. And the secretary also mentioned about the function of the electrical. So maybe it's difficult for the government to comment on that. Maybe I should say this. I hope that before the projects are presented to us, there should be more information given to us. I'm not talking about having a thick paper. When you come do a project, you would come up with papers on the project definition and so on, PPIA and so on and so forth. And if these documents are deposited, say, in a library, and if we are interested, we can gain access to these documents. That would help us strengthen our role, because in the absence of any information, even if we want to do more, then it would be impossible for us to do so. Even if we have the professional expertise, we won't be able to make good judgments in the absence of such papers. So I hope that improvement can be made in that aspect. I don't want you to heap extra burden on you to present us with more papers. Since you are coming to us with a paper, you must have already done some analysis. So can that be made accessible to us? Because for myself, after reading through such papers, I will learn more about the projects and learn more about the rationale behind certain things. And then Dr. Hong mentioned about imported workers. I've heard about this. For some imported workers, they could live in Shenzhen, in Liantang, But then in the future, it is said that the government departments mandate them to live in Hong Kong, and they're not allowed to live in Shenzhen and Zhuhai. But now, living in Shenzhen and Zhuhai is very convenient, and there is, say, direct very convenient transport, say in the form of coaches traveling between Shenzhen, Zhuhai, and Hong Kong. And I don't know why there is a rumor saying that that there is low occupancy rate of quarters for imported workers. So there is a rumor saying that the Development Bureau will mandate imported workers to live in Hong Kong, even though they may have some quarters in Shenzhen. So that I find that logic very weird. I hope to hear the government's response on that, please. Thank you.
Secretary. Thank you. I'll respond to the points made one by one. In relation to high costs hurting our business environment and competitiveness, we agree So we should be careful that that does not happen. But in fact, for many trades and industries of Hong Kong, if we are to compete in prices, this is not the right direction to take for us. I think we should make sure quality is high. We should try to compress costs, but then we should not compare ourselves to other cities only in terms of costs, because we have different backgrounds. We should strive for, while we have relatively high costs, an even higher quality and cost effectiveness. I think it's the same with our approach adopted for the two-envelope approach. We do not want the lowest bids win. Because we don't let the lowest bids win, we have higher costs. That is a given. But then we have ensured quality with this. There is always a balance that has to be struck. You have also talked about foreign labor. I think what you said is the exact opposite of what we have. The quota is 12,000, but for the accommodation for foreign labor in Tam Mei, it only has 7,000 beds. So not all foreign labor can live in the accommodation. Apart from the accommodation in Tam Mei, contractors can arrange for other accommodation for foreign labor, and they can allow foreign labor to stay in the mainland. In fact, many contractors told us they would arrange for foreign labor to live on the mainland. We, in fact, won't encourage contractors to arrange for foreign labor to live in the accommodation in Tam Mei because we do not have enough places for all foreign labor. But then we have also asked contractors to make sure there is reasonable commute for workers. If someone is living in Zhuhai, of course it can be quite convenient for them to get to Hong Kong. But in some cases we heard they have arranged for foreign labor to live further away, and they have to start their commute before dawn. Of course, we do not encourage that. Regarding construction costs, we will have in-depth analyses in future. As said earlier, we also want to say that we have some figures that we can share with you. The preliminary manpower and material costs. My colleague can perhaps share that with you later. But we take note of the member suggestion also in relation to approval processes. I will now let my colleague talk about the costs. Permanent Secretary, thank you. We have some figures on the proportions on the relevant types of costs. Manpower, that is wages, would take up 30 to 40%. Materials, it would be 25 to 35%. And machinery, it would be 10 to 20%. There are also other costs involved that would be specific to each project. Like the member said, we want to quantify the costs, because it is only after we have quantified the costs that we can identify where we have higher costs and where we should pay attention. The study would also touch on how we can decrease the costs. It would offer some direction for us. It would also tell us how much effort we have to put into each area and how much time it would take to complete certain types of work. It would allow us with such information to set priorities and practice cost management in future. Chair, I have a follow-up question. In fact, we have heard from foreign workers in particular that the government would not allow them to stay in Shenzhen or Zhuhai. Can the government make clarifications? Thank you. We will definitely enhance communication to prevent any misconceptions. Thank you. All right, thank you. It's now my turn to speak. As Mr. Gary Zhang said, because of insufficient information, I'm speaking not from the perspective of being someone with engineering background. There are many electrical members with the right background to speak on this. They have engineering backgrounds or business backgrounds. So I think with the current term of the council, it may be different from before in the sense that we do not have the opposition here. So the administration can be a bit more assertive and provide more information for the reference of members. We would no longer filibuster through the processes, and I think we can be considered as partners to the executive. So the government can perhaps provide us with more details of works projects. I myself remember a project in particular with the Cultural Center in New Territories East. That is a new project that the public has been expecting. And I think there should be a landmark in New Territories East, in particular a cultural landmark. But then it is said that this amount cost for the amplifiers and the facilities, audio facilities in the performance venue would be $700 million. People thus have raised concerns. What kind of audiovisual facilities are you buying that would justify such high costs? Are they world-class audiovisual facilities? So some considered it unnecessary. Some would say that if you make use of part of the $700 million to support arts groups, it would be better because it would help nurture talents in the area instead of only investing in the hardware of audio facilities. Because not only would the initial costs be high, the maintenance costs would also be high. In fact, I also remember another works project in Yunlong that involves drainage works. The water pump would also cost $3 billion. I believe it was a project of the Development Bureau. The administration has tried hard to convince us that the project is worth the cost. I think if the administration has been transparent in disclosing the costs, it would be easier for them to justify the costs. Of course, members may still raise objections, but then with such information, I think we can have a more objective assessment of the costs. I would urge the administration to put more content in the paper. In fact, in paragraph 16, it is said that the project proposal will be listed clearly for works projects, but I would say that is not the case so far. Some are also concerned that there would be a design that is overly complicated. I don't think any content in the paper has touched on that issue. Can the administration disclose more details in future so that for something that is worth tens of billions of dollars, you won't only have a paper that has 10 odd pages to justify the cost. That is my suggestion. I would also like to talk about another point. Right now, you're adopting parallel tendering. Would the problem arise that would have the administration unable to make changes with the proposal when obtaining funding from the LegCo? Thank you. Secretary. Thank you. Your first suggestion was for us to include more content in the paper submitted to the Public Works Subcommittee. Of course, we would first go to a panel to seek members' agreement. And for the papers submitted to the panels, then I hope members would understand we would not include as much content as we do with the paper provided to the Public Works Subcommittee. It is because we want to provide information to panel members as soon as possible, so we do not have comprehensive proposals at that stage. But once we have tapped into the pulse of panel members and have a preliminary understanding of members' concerns, we would have more details in the Public Works Subcommittee's paper. As members may note in recent months, for projects that have a higher estimate, for example, projects in the Northern Metropolis that would involve tens of billions of dollars, we would have much more information than we did before. We can perhaps adopt the same or similar benchmarks for other public works projects. We will definitely review our internal workflow. We can perhaps provide more information for potential concerns of members. In fact, it is not just for some minor categories of projects for the specific installations such as E&M installations or the design itself. For example, for a park, the design would definitely affect the cost of the project. So we will ask colleagues to provide more specific content that would respond to the potential concerns of members. The member also mentioned there would be a problem of over-design, that is having an overly complicated design. I'll perhaps let my colleague take that question. Thank you. The PSGO is exactly going to deal with this issue. At the project inception stage, the colleagues of PSGO would be involved in the discussions. If it is considered that the approach of fitness for purpose and no frills is not adopted, colleagues would have to ask questions in order to make sure the costs are reasonable. In relation to parallel tendering, as said before, we would only approve the bids with the approval of LegCo. We will review our procedures in due course. For some projects, because we have heard members' concerns, we have eliminated some processes in the workflow. Thank you.
Next one, Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you, Chair. I've read the paper. The coverage is rather broad, and I understand that in relation to the issue at hand, and that is the construction cost management, I am concerned about 2 points. First, about approval, the administrative procedures involved. And the government is now looking at how to streamline the procedures. And I look forward to the first batch of suggestions from the government. After all, why construction cost is too high in Hong Kong? And that is substantially because of the administrative procedures. And professionals spend a lot of their efforts on paperwork rather than on really creative tasks. So that is very unique in Hong Kong. And then price comparison. Hong Kong vis-a-vis other places. I've been citing this example. For an MIC module, the materials and the workers on the mainland are involved. But then how come it gets so much more expensive when it comes to Hong Kong? And that had to do with the design, the logistics, the insurance, and so on. And I hope that through this platform, we can pool our wisdom and put our heads together and see how we can help. Now, following up on what the chairman said about design, are we having to toward an order in terms of design? I know that the government has been working on that, but for various projects, we see that there are 2 problems. The design really dictates the construction method. Say, if I build a cycling track, well, when we talk about the unit cost, and it's no problem. But then the alignment of the cycling track, how is it like? That will affect the cost very much. And we can't say that the alignment is wrong because maybe a number of factors have been taken on board in coming up with the alignment. The public's opinion has been taken on board. But shall we aim to strike a balance? Is there a mechanism for striking a balance? I would not say that it doesn't exist. But then sometimes when the projects come to the electrical, then we will provide some opinions, and that takes up time as well. And another situation is about drinking water. There is a certain set of standard, but we are taking the upper limit of the standard for reference. And say, for example, for the same lamp in the same design, well, there may be a difference if the lamp is made in Italy rather than in China. I believe the government is aware of this, but in the entire process, the government being monitoring very prudent in monitoring the processes. The last point is about risk management. I understand there is a need to do that. So who is going to shoulder the risk, the landlord or the contractor? But in actual reality, because of the political sentiment in the past, we have all the risks being shouldered by the contractors. And that would drive up the construction cost as well. I hope that in your review process, you should look at this, how to strike a balance, how to further compress the construction or drive down the construction cost. Secretary, I thank Mr. Lam for your proposal or suggestion. You talk about the design being too demanding, or is it that the government is being too rigid in terms of sticking to our design? And then you mentioned about something that we will also re-examine, our existing standards. Maybe back many years ago when we set the standards, they were reasonable, but as time passes, people impose more standards, and as a result, the standards are unreasonably high. And we have to be looking at these in detail, and the PSGO has already embarked on work in that regard. And also the risk premium, I think this is something we should also scrutinize. And related to it is also something that we have talked about, the electrical, the construction security of payment issue, and we make sure that people were not too worried about not being able to get the payment, then that will help with the reducing the construction cost. Because in the construction process, different stakeholders will add in their own risk premiums. So going forward, we would like to give a detailed and do a detailed analysis on that. We look forward to exchanging views with you. The second round for members, we must end by 10:30 because we have to hand over the room to another meeting. So I'll give you 4 minutes each. So please make the best use of your time. I have been too lenient on the timing. Please leave some time for the government officers to respond. Please be succinct in your question. Dr. Low, thank you. Chairman, imported workers. What should be the accommodation arrangement for them? I think there's a need for the government to clarify, because there have been a lot of rumors. Sometimes the rumors come out of nowhere. Recently, the airport security company has got 748 places in terms of quota, and the imported workers will be involved in the airport work. And these mainland workers will be living in Zhuhai, and there are very good youth quarters there. So that goes to show that nobody is forcing the imported workers to live in the Taipei quarters. The government officials have been clear, because there aren't enough places in Taipei. So how come the government will make them will mandate workers to live in Hong Kong? That is not possible. And then the airport security company is recruiting workers on the mainland. That is very welcome recruitment exercise, because 5 people are competing for 1 job, and this is something good. And by 2027, there will be a shortage of 40,000 workers at various grades in the construction industry. Now, I'm more on the NEC form. There is a paragraph on NEC form and how it is being adopted. It is said that for major capital works projects commence in 2023, 100% of them have adopted the NEC form. The beauty of the NEC form is that it is stated in the paper. If the actual construction cost is lower than the target cost, the contractor can share the cost saving with the client. When the actual construction expenditure exceeds the target cost, the client will bear the difference together with the contractor. So we should all work hard together to benefit. This is something good. But then at the PWSC, when we vet the works projects, we find that, say, for major capital infrastructure projects, NEC form has been adopted. But for other projects like universities, hospitals, the construction cost is quite substantial. But then the NEC form is not being adopted. How are you going to make sure that the NEC form is properly promoted? And then another comment on the overall performance of public works. There are 2 paragraphs giving us the detailed figures. And in the past, I have raised this. We are very concerned at the electrical of the projects which have cost overruns. But actually, overall, we are saving on the cost and not overspend and not have overspending. Maybe some people say that you have make a bigger APE than what is actually needed, and as a result, you have been able to save. But anyway, it is clear that overall speaking, the overall total expenditure is not higher simply because there is additional funding for some projects. So we have to be pragmatic and objective in our approach. But in the past, when the opposition camp was filibustering, and then whenever there were cost overruns, the opposition camp would make harsh criticisms on these projects. So we have to be objective in looking at these things, but it doesn't mean that our construction cost is sort of desirable in a sense. And I think that the high construction cost is related to the prolonged construction period as well. Okay, can I defer to the PS to talk about the NEC form? In 2009, we piloted the first public works contracts in the NEC. We are seeing some results, and the approach is different from the conventional one. We have been working together and promoting these among the works departments, and basically all public works contracts come with NEC form, and the colleagues have been able to grasp the technique well. And we are also promoting the NEC among the public sector organizations, and we are sharing our experience as well. Some public sector bodies are starting to adopt NEC. MTRC is one, and then the AA is also adopting it in some projects. And for the housing authority, they might not use the name of NEC form, but they are actually taking reference from the NEC in the drawing up their contracts. So we will continue to work hard and to introduce the NEC to other organizations for wider adoption. Thank you. Mr. Chen Xiu-hong. Thank you, Chair. Just now, our colleagues have said that the Development Bureau has done a lot of work in the past couple of years. At the PWSC and FC, I've seen improvement being made as reflected in the papers submitted to us. And the information is more detailed in the papers. And the Secretary has promised that for, say, major and complicated projects, more information would be furnished to us. But for, say, medium-sized projects, if they are more complicated and there are no similar projects in the future, more information should be provided to us to facilitate our scrutiny. And then I'm also concerned about the trend of the tender prices. And in the PowerPoint page 7, it is said that the tender price index remains generally stable, but it's not stable. Actually, it's getting higher. And if we look at also the building services cost, the trend is stable, I would say. When we look at the whole picture, we should not be just looking at the public works projects, because in the entire construction sector, private projects are being taken forward. Does the Development Bureau know about the relevant indexes in the private sector? Maybe you're not aware of them because the data rest with the private sector. What would be the price trends in the private sector? So would you be helping out with the private sector in terms of reducing the construction cost? That's the first question. Second question, and the application of NEC, Dr. Low has mentioned something about this. I'd like to follow up. I think the NEC is beneficial in a way. And the idea is that there would be risk sharing or benefit sharing mechanism. The NEC, is it an open book sort of management model? Well, in 2023, the NEC approach has been taken forward in full. You must have collected a lot of data in relation to the NEC, including the contractors' profits and so on. Have the Development Bureau and the PSGO built a database on that? And you may find that for certain items, they're particularly costly, while others are not that costly. So with all these data, then you may be able to identify areas which are particularly risky, and as a result, when you vet the tender, you'll be able to deal with these different items accordingly. And you said that for the 534 Category A projects completed, and you say that you've been able to save around 10% of the costs. But in the project estimates presented to us, you've already included the 10% contingency provisions. So have you done anything especially in order to save up on the 10% in the costs?
Thank you, Secretary. I'll perhaps let the Permanent Secretary answer the questions. Well, some of it I will have the head of the PSGO answer the questions. I will answer some of the earlier questions. Indeed, the indices have remained more or less generally stable since 2014. There has not been a significant increase. We will continue to monitor the trends. Well, I think we have to bear in mind right now we're in July of 2024 and you are using data from before. Of course, thank you for the clarification. We will keep in view the situation in the remaining portion of the year. With the adoption of the NEC form, there will be cost and profit sharing, and it is indeed an open book arrangement where we would see all costs of contractors to make sure money is put to good use. We do have such data, as the members said, and we will look into such data in the study. We will look at the operational costs of the contractors. We will look at their profits. We will also look at their premiums. These will definitely help us scrutinize the estimates of projects in future. It is said that in the past 10 years, there are 500 odd projects that are completed within the estimates. There are indeed contingencies earmarked, and contingencies are used when there is an alteration of the scope of works. It is often the case we have to make use of the contingencies. I'm sure members would understand. Indeed, for the change in scope of works, some it would involve the addition of works, some it would be the enhancements to the existing works. There are different changes. Thank you. Mr. Lau Kwok Fan. Thank you. Before I ask questions, I would like to clarify something. I object only to unreasonably low bids. I do not have a problem with lowest bids alone. For unreasonably low bids, their costs would often be higher than estimated in reality, and in turn it would cause delay in the works. So that's the clarification I would like to make. I would like to follow up on what the administration said. It is said that there will only be more public works projects in future with the development of the Northern Metropolis because an approach of infrastructure-led development is taken. We will have more projects. I do support centralized procurement being adopted for the efficiency of project operations. We can do centralized procurement and storage for goods, but then we can also practice centralized procurement for services. For example, for surveying, I think there can be centralized procurement to achieve cost effectiveness and efficiency. Can the Secretary talk about the administration stance on this? I do understand that there has to be careful consideration with each project. I think it would be even better if we have case studies. I remember in April 1997, there was a paper. So from piling to the completion of superstructure, it would take 37 months to complete. But in 2022, the answer would be that it would take 4 to 5 years to complete. So it's 1 to 2 years longer than before. So why is it that, for example, for a similar public housing project as we had before, why it takes longer to complete the project? I think we can perhaps look into the reasons. I also want to talk about a policy concern. With legislation in place, the Bureau is now looking into streamlining the approval processes. But then we have seen the construction costs being positively related to time taken to complete the project. It would take time, for example, to resume the land, and then they would have the CEDD to do some works, and then the housing department would commence their site formation works. So is it possible that we can combine some of these processes? Of course, that would require better coordination among departments. The Permanent Secretary mentioned the cost of basements being quite high. I'm thinking if it has something to do with the plot ratio restriction for underground car parks. Before you can exempt the restriction for underground car parks, I know that there has been some improvement, but is that enough? I think perhaps some costs arose because of people having to comply with legislation. I think perhaps it is time to review certain policies. In fact, in EC Award, Hong Kong has got a lot of such awards in both the mainland and overseas. I think perhaps the Development Bureau can promote to members of the council and society what awards we have achieved so that we would know what construction methods are innovative, and then we can further promote the use of such methods. Thank you, Secretary. Thank you. We indeed need to do more to promote the awards that we got. It's not just to buff up ourselves, it's about telling people what we did. In fact, we would always say term contract or term consultancy. I think we can perhaps look into consolidating such in order to achieve efficiency, and we can look into it in our study. The member also mentioned that because processes of departments would be undertaken one by one, it would slow the process. And we have now been trying to have relevant work undertaken by a single department. So perhaps we will have a single department that would do the tendering as well as the initial works. We believe it would definitely help decrease the costs. And again, this is something that we are studying. We have selected some case studies for discussions of this subcommittee. I think we can perhaps discuss with our colleagues to see the specific examples that we can provide for members' reference. Dr. Wendy Hung, thank you. I want to talk about, according to the administration, very high standards that are being adopted. I want to say for some INT offices, we do not need very nice infrastructure. For example, many companies in INT started in basements. Even Alibaba started in dilapidated facilities. With INT premises, we are making them really beautiful, but then the utilization rate right now is just 40%. Is it worth it? I understand the industry would like only low-class facilities and just some basic infrastructure for them to get started so that they can rent the premises at a cheaper price. With Sentin Technopole, the development in the loop, I think we should really review our approach taken with the construction of INT premises. Construction materials, according to the administration, would take up 25 to 35% of the total construction cost. I heard from the industry that there are indeed cheaper materials that would have comparable functions, but they do not comply with the standards in Hong Kong. I think with the development of the times, we should really review the standards adopted in Hong Kong to see if we need to adopt perhaps other standards necessary. Thank you. Secretary, thank you. I'll let my colleagues answer the other questions. I will answer the question on the high standards adopted for designs. Well, we would say that through the years, because there are different stages of construction, we have imposed various standards. So the standards having built up have indeed perhaps been excessive. With INT premises, it is the case that we want to have infrastructure that is not only beautiful. We are trying to make the premises functional, which has increased the costs. But of course, we will try to adopt a no-frills approach with the construction of the premises. I'll let the permanent secretary answer the other questions. Thank you. Indeed, with construction and material standards, it is time for us to review such. In our study, we will review our design standards compared to those of other places. What are the deficiencies and what we have to change? The member may note that for materials there are used in different works. We have to consider if we make use of other materials, if it is going to decrease our cost significantly, we'll definitely try to switch to such as soon as possible. We will set priorities based on such. The member also mentioned that for some materials or products, they have been commonly used elsewhere, perhaps in the mainland, but they do not comply with the standards in Hong Kong, which is why we have set up the Building and Research Institute, and it is to commence operations in Hong Kong at the end of this year to see if there are other products elsewhere that would meet our standards and they can be used in the industry in Hong Kong. That should provide more options. Thank you.
Now, I'd like to manage the time better now. Ms. Doreen Kong, first round, and Mr. Chen Xiu-hong, the third round. Can you be very brief? 2 minutes for you. And then I'll draw a line there because we have to hand over the room to another meeting. Ms. Doreen Kong, thank you, Chair. Chair, I agree with what Dr. Hong said. We have to explore different materials which are less costly. In terms of green construction materials, the world, other countries in the world have developed rapidly in that aspect. And people have the misconception that green materials are more costly. I hope that we can do more studies in that aspect. We must take on new mindset. The world around, even for our country, there are a lot of eco materials being used. And also affordability is another idea. And Mr. Edward Lau said we have obtained different awards, and that's good. But then for, say, residential buildings, residential projects, different countries are adopting the concept of affordable housing, and that is the ultimate product should be affordable. Because if we build things more in a costly way, we have to sell them at a high price. So can we move along that kind of direction? Let me share this. I went to Rotterdam last year. The Delft University there is an advanced university, is a world-famous university in construction technology and construction materials. It is a research university in that respect. For Hong Kong, I'm studying now in the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Let me declare that the PolyU has the potential to be turned into such a university to contribute more to the construction industry. It is already making great contributions. Can we become a Delft University? Can PolyU become a Delft University and make contributions to Hong Kong? I think this is my comment here. Secretary, I'll see if the PS has any initial response. Thank you, Chair. Just now, we mentioned that we would like to bring in new materials and products in the construction industry. But because our system may be different, our standards may be different from other places, and it takes a long time to introduce new materials to the sector, and that deters the construction sector in doing that. So we are going to launch the Building Testing and Research Institute to address that shortcoming. For this institute, it will look at overseas or mainland products which are good or have an advantage. We'll try to make sure that it can meet with our local standards and the products can also be widely adopted in the sector, and that will help drive construction costs down as well. And then for this institute, it will work together with different organizations in Hong Kong. For a lot of testing and R&D work, we'd like to partner with universities. For PolyU, we are working closely together with it to explore different materials. The 690 high strength steel. Well, they have a research center, which is a national research center. We have introduced that kind of steel on the mainland, and we have an internal task force set up for that. And we have come up with a standard for that kind of material, and that can be used in public works projects and also private sector projects. And a dozen or so projects are using this high strength steel. And further still, we are working with the PolyU to use an even higher standard of steel, and that is S960 steel. And that will be used in a project in the northern metropolis. And there is close collaboration among the university, the government, and the sector. This is a tripartite collaboration, and for the institute, it will beef up work in that regard. Mr. Chen Xiuhong. 2 questions. We originally set out to talk about the prevailing cost management measures, and we said that central procurement is something that we can think further about. And I'm happy that the Development Bureau is willing to consider central procurement approach. Now, I want reminder, the central procurement approach should only be adopted in materials commonly used, and let's not use it in some other materials. We're not talking about hedging here. If there can be 30% to 50% of central procurement, that will help stabilize the prices of certain materials. Let's not extend the scope too wide. Now, another question is about promoting new technologies and safe technologies. The Development Bureau has spared no effort in doing that. And we are talking about 4S, Smart Site Safety System, and you are also promoting the 4S in the private sector through the CIC. There are other innovative technologies which can be applied, and some contractors are not willing to adopt these technologies because in the consultancy agreements, the 63 to 70% will be taken up by the technical aspects, and 40% to 50% for works contracts. But then if the safety element is being put into the contract, that will only take up about 1 to 2% in the scores. As a result, the bidders are not motivated to adopt safe and innovative technologies. So would you be raising the scores in that aspect? Or maybe we should exclude that altogether first in your evaluation, and after that you can include that in the overall evaluation, and that will motivate them to adopt that kind of safe, innovative technologies. Can I defer to the PS because it involves the tender design? For major works now, we are requiring design for safety. Now, what I would like to say is that in terms of innovative technology, in the technical proposals, some marks are reserved for the contractors to make innovative proposals. Extra marks or scores will be given to them in that respect. And for the NEC form, we have a Hong Kong version or edition with a clause saying that through this NEC, they can propose innovative technologies. And so we are dealing with that through the contract. Thank you, Chair. I think that's it for the agenda today. AOB? If not, the next meeting, like I said, well, the date is to be determined. It's around late September or early October. Thank you for coming. Thank you.